So everybody see and hear before we get started? We're in good shape? Okay, well, great. Well, welcome everyone to our session number 2 of 3 sessions of the Stewardship Academy. We have people from the North Carolina Conference, Western North Carolina, Virginia, Baltimore, Washington, and maybe even West Virginia and Minnesota who have signed up for this class. So it's good to be with you. Before we get started, does anybody have any questions from last week? Or did anybody really spend some time with the calendar and jot some things down? We did the annual stewardship calendar last week. And so I'd love to hear some feedback if that was something you had some time to work on this week. So just unmute yourself and let me know. Okay. Gary, you had time to work on it a little bit?
Yeah, I was working on it with the class and with our church. We haven't had fundraisers in our church for over 20 years. So we're trying to gear up a program right now. We're working with Tommy Herndon and getting a lot of education. People never been around fundraising.
Okay. Now, what church are you affiliated with?
Bethia United Methodist in Chesterfield County.
Sure. I know exactly where you are. Okay, well, good. Well, I'm glad you're part of it. Well, again, if you're new to the session, I'm Bert Brooks. I'm the Director of Stewardship and Outreach for the United Methodist Credit Union, and I'm an elder in the Virginia Conference, somewhat retired, but not for leisure purposes, still working full-time in ministry. And I've been working in the field of stewardship for a long time. And so a lot of what I present is some things I have experienced. You may have experienced other things that you can build on what I'm talking about. So as I said last week, I'm coming to you not as an educator, but as a consultant to you and your church. In other words, the role play that I'm doing with you is you've invited me to your church with one objective: to grow your stewardship ministry. And you said, Bert, come and help us set up some ideas to grow our stewardship ministry. And so we start where you are. So today, we're going to build on what we did last week. That stewardship at its best is proactive. And the calendar is one of the most proactive tools you have as a pastor or a lay leader, to put something on that calendar and then begin to organize the resources around that, whether it is activity, whether it is volunteer resource, whether it's financial resource. And there's a good chance that if you put it on that calendar and you begin to look at it well enough in advance, then it will come to be. We've all been in the church where at the last minute, we've tried to rush something and the results were less than desirable. So my theory behind this is the more you plan these things out, the more effective they will be when you grow that ministry. So that's the idea of the calendar. Mentioned last week that I kind of have several pointers for the small membership church, the mid-sized church, and the large church. And today we're going to look at an annual campaign. And there's a good chance that the small membership church doesn't do annual campaigns. Maybe it just feels a little overwhelming when you only have 15 in the pew or 25 in the pew. It may just feel too much. Well, I understand that. So as we mentioned last week, we may not be able to do the campaign, but we can certainly do the teaching series, just as if we were a large church, because we are trying to grow discipleship. And there's no reason, I don't think God has any thoughts that because someone's a member of a large church, they can grow in discipleship any more or less than a member of a small membership church. And so we're not saying that because one is part of a large membership church, they're more likely to advance as a disciple. No, not at all. As a matter of fact, it could be opposite. members of the small membership church may be growing as disciples faster than anyone else. And so we're not saying that one group or the other is going to be more effective in this. So we look to see where we are, and then we apply the best theological and biblical principles that we can to help our folks grow. Well, Jim Rohn is an old motivational speaker that I listened to a long time ago, and he's still on YouTube. He's been deceased for 30 years, I suppose. And it struck me early in my ministry when I heard him say, if you don't plant in the spring, there's a good chance you're going to have to beg in the winter. And that's not a bad thought when it comes to stewardship. We might say, if you don't plant in the fall, you might have to beg all year long next year, and especially in the winter. So it makes sense that we sow seeds of whatever it is we're trying to do. And stewardship is really sowing those seeds so that we will have a harvest, not just the coming year, but years past that. Stewardship does require consistency. You can't really just hit or miss it. We're going to have a campaign this year, and we're going to skip 3 years, and then we're going to come back with another one. Then we've got a new pastor, and we need to skip that for 2 years. And then about the third year of that, we'll have another one. You see, you never gain any traction, any growth whatsoever. So I think your church leadership just has to commit to it, no matter who the pastor is, no matter who the stewardship chair is, that this is just what we do here. We have a stewardship series every year, year in and year out, whether it results in a pledge card or not. So I think that's important if your lay leadership can go ahead and claim that and put it on the calendar. So I'm going to give you one stewardship tip that will take you the rest of your ministry or your rest of your leadership. On on your Google Calendar, you can put repeat, like you do birthdays and other things. Put Commitment Sunday on the Sunday before Thanksgiving and put never ends. Hit that box, never ends. Commitment Sunday on the Sunday before Thanksgiving, and it'll appear every year. Now, that's a default position. If you've got other things that you can do this better, then do it. You might have a spring campaign. You might have an earlier in the fall campaign. But if you have no thoughts about this whatsoever, then that's not a bad place to start. And then you back it up 3 weeks, and from that, you have 3 preaching Sundays or teaching Sundays or educational Sundays. And then you say, Campaign Sunday 1, Campaign Sunday 2, Campaign Sunday 3. And you can have those repeat forever on your calendar. If you do that, a stewardship campaign will never catch you by surprise. No one will get there to the middle of October and go, yeah, we haven't talked about stewardship. What are we going to do? And you remember the scenario I had at church that they actually pulled the card out in front of me and scratched off last year and penciled in this year, handed it to someone in the office and said, can we get these reprinted and get them sent out? And that was it. That was it. And, the church has been around for 100 years, so I may be wrong in all of this. I mean, maybe that's all you need to do. But I think if you really plan it out, you'll be really generating not only deeper discipleship, but you'll have more mission and ministry funds to work with. So that's why the importance of this annual event or this annual series is so important. The Sunday before Thanksgiving just kind of is a natural period. That's why I put that. When I was in the pastorate, I always had my commitment Sunday on the Sunday before Thanksgiving. And if the church could afford it, we would have a Thanksgiving luncheon. Feed everybody. Now, in a multi-point situation, I don't know how you do that or whether you can do that. But there's something about food, there's something about celebration, there's something about joy, and it all works together very nicely. At the end of this session, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I call a canned program that you might want to look at that has all of these component parts in it. This doesn't have to be hard. I mean, I think every church should at least once every now and then hear John Wesley's use of money. Sunday, the first Sunday could be earn all you can, but actually John Wesley said gain all you can if you go ahead and get his sermon. Gain all you can. And then the second Sunday, save all you can. And then the third Sunday, give all you can. And then the fourth Sunday, let's party. Okay? So that would be your 4 Sundays right there. And I really think we may be doing a disservice to our people by not using John Wesley's. I mean, it's almost a given. It's the slam dunk, so to speak, that we have right at our fingertips for a 3 Sunday teaching series right there. You don't even have to buy any other books. You just have to kind of springboard him. I would not get into the thick of that sermon because, some of it is based on his day and time, but I would be able to modernize and come up with a contemporary way to say the same thing. And so I would suggest to you, and even if you leave the call right now, you've just got $1 million bonus right there. You've got your sermon series for this fall and you're ready to go. So with that in mind, it's there. The resources are there for us to teach, preach, and then conclude with a commitment if our church size allows that. So I would suggest that right off the bat. If you were going to design an annual campaign, just design it from scratch, I would suggest you get 3 or 4 scriptures that help you explain the generosity, the joy of giving, gratefulness, and there are lots of them, and just pick those 4 that you're going to do this year and help people to, kind of grow into those scriptures. Again, last week we said we don't want to get the church budget in this yet. This is still over here somewhere. We're growing people. And to tell you, I'm going to give you a little advance, just pointer before I end today. The Consecration Sunday model that I'm going to share with you says that you don't do your budget until all of your commitment cards have come in. Finance committees are scared to death of Consecration Sunday. Let me just let you know, they're scared to death of it because it flips, it flips the way we do things. Instead of saying, here's the budget, come on, folks, we got to step up, step up, step up. Consecration Sunday model, which really is good theology, it really is good theology, says once we have seen what this congregation does personally, then we can match up a budget with that. We can match up a budget with that. And I think that's hard for churches to do because that truly says you're going to have to get out of the boat and walk on water a few minutes just to make sure there is solid ground under you. But those are some interesting points in how we still need to separate out stewardship from fundraising. Both important, but they get all mixed up together. Let me just stop. Did that little 5-minute monologue strike a bell anywhere? I'll have a sip of coffee. If anybody wants to say anything, now's the time to do it.
Well, I for one, George Coates.
Is this George?
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm at Hickory Grove in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Okay.
That what you've given me is a big help because my wife and I came here as co-pastors as the pandemic was reaching its peak. They had already stopped in-person worship, had already stopped having a lot of meetings, but over time had been having the process of distributing a pledge card and then collecting it. That was basically all the church had done.
Yeah.
So we are at rebuilding,
Mhm.
coming from the bottom. And what you've just given me, as you said, I could stop right now and have a pattern for this year.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I, of course, want to learn more so that we can build on that and
Yes.
get back to some.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's not hard once you kind of in a group like this, you realize it's not as kind of intimidating as you might think to grow a stewardship ministry because the resources are at our fingertips. And so that's a good point, George. Well, I agree. You've got some good material right in front of you right now to work with this fall. One more comment. Anybody else want to say anything before we move forward?
Bert, I was interested in hearing what you might think about using our membership vows as part of a stewardship commitment.
Yeah. Here's splitting hairs right here, and I'm going to share it with you because it comes up. Sometimes during a commitment time or annual campaign, we ask people to make 5 commitments. Is that what you're talking about? Prayers, presence, gifts, service, witness.
Yes.
And I think that's wonderful, but it makes all of the others equally visible. In other words, now I'm, instead of 100% focused on the gifts, I'm 20% focused on gifts, 20% focused on, and I think what I would say is I would do those maybe in the next quarter, but when you're talking about the stewardship of finances, I think you're better off letting it be a standalone. You know, in maybe in the winter quarter, you get people saying, okay, this is a time to commit to prayer. Probably don't need to fill anything out, but you may have like a church prayer. You know, they call it a breakthrough prayer, which is very effective. You might be doing that for 3 months, and then for 3 months, you might have a mission focus. But I think effectively, the financial stewardship is a standalone, ideally. Okay, good question. Excellent question. Excellent question. All right, well, then we'll move on to some other ideas here. I like themes during stewardship time. I like themes like, here's one that is elementary by default. Step up and step out. Step up and step out. And the theme behind that is they're going to step up in their giving and step out in their discipleship. Step up, step out. There's nothing new about that. It's been around forever. You've probably used it. But the theme then will also help carry this preaching series, this worship series. They'll match up because at the end, everybody, even if they didn't make it every Sunday or catch all the worship services, the themes will stick in your mind pretty easily as to what the goal is. So I like a theme. It also could be something like walking into God's future. See, it focuses on individual discipleship, but you can also say we're walking together. It is a communal thing in our church. Rather than focusing again on the church exclusively, because then you're going to kind of default back to the church's budget, I think. So you want to make sure you kind of have individual givers and the mission of the church somewhat, balanced in these campaigns so that we don't, forget the individual discipleship process. So I like themes. I also like this, step up 1% of your giving. And have you seen these charts? This is a chart that's been around forever, where you step up 1. And in this particular chart, in advance, you put the current giving numbers on these steps. You don't put names, you never put names, but you say, X number of our congregation gives at the, $10 a week level, X number give at the $100 a week, X number give at the, whatever. This is a very useful thing. It's in this little book called Consecration Sunday that I'm just going to mention to you briefly, because I just did a full seminar on this 2 weeks ago. And if you want that video, you can get it by request. But I talked a lot about this. Our language is so important. The language we use, okay. This is an innocent mistake by the pastor or the stewardship chair or whoever's going to make this announcement. Our goal for next year is that you increase your giving by 1%. We might have talked about this last week, but it's so important to get this one right. What do I hear when the person makes that announcement on that, say, first Sunday? Our goal for every member and visitor and whoever of this church is to increase your giving by 1%. Or not hear that.
That's the institute.
I'm sitting in
speaking.
I'm sitting in the pew with my wife, my friend, my whoever, and I turn to them and I say, "That sounds pretty good. I gave $100 last year. They want me to increase it by 1%. I think $101 I believe I can do."
Yeah.
Did everybody just hear that? That's what came across. I mean, the pastor just told me to do that. I'm going to do what pastor says do, because that's not the way it's done. So be very careful. You have to say, we would challenge you to grow by 1% in relation to your income. You're giving in relation to your income. It's a very different measure there. So if I gave $100 and I grow 1% in relation to my income, who knows? That may be $1,000 for next year. I don't know. So it's in relation to your income. So we want you to increase giving in relation to yourself, to your own blessings, to your own income, to your own storehouse, however we want to use that in public language. Because otherwise, if we just say we want you to increase your giving by 1%, what are you going to get? $18 more next year in terms of total gifts? It sounds right, but there's more to it. So when you're talking about the challenge toward, say, the tithe, it's always a percentage of your income, not a percentage of your past giving. Percentage of your income, always. If you want to move people to the tithe, theoretically, this is the way to do it, is 1% in relation to your income each year. And again, theoretically, over the course of 10 years, you should have everyone tithing. It's not going to be that way, but there will be progress in helping people tithe. Here's where then the church budget comes into play. The more that I see proportional giving as a form of discipleship, the more then I will provide the church with ministry funds. That's just what we're doing. So we're providing the church with long-term ministry funds so that, again, the church doesn't have to come up short each and every year to do what it wants to do. Stewardship then is planting seeds, growing. Budget is like pulling apples off the tree. There can't be but so much fruit on that tree when you're never planting new trees, new fruit trees. You hear your people say all they do here is ask for money. Have you ever heard that, or is that just me when I was a pastor? All they do here is ask for money. And it almost does sound like we continue to believe that there's more fruit on this tree that has pretty well been picked over because nothing new has been planted. And so just something to think about. Language here makes the difference. Language and how you do it makes the difference. So I like that as an ongoing challenge. I also like—
I had a quick question
Sure.
before you move on. This is
Okay,
Josette.
go ahead. Yeah.
So you said language. So would it be okay to say we would challenge you in your personal spiritual growth to increase your giving by 1% in relation to your income, or is that too much?
No, I mean, it is a spiritual thing. I mean, whenever we let go of our kind of personal resource, we are saying that we believe in the work of the Church of Jesus Christ, and we also believe that that is a response to the blessings that we have already received. So I could be as bold as say it would be my hope for this church that we are all tithers in 5 years. In 5 years, and some people may be able to go up 2% if they're made aware of it. Some may do better. Some may just can only go 0.5%. As long as we're all moving as a group, some are in the front of it, some are in the back, but everybody's moving. That would be my hope for a stewardship ministry. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. No. And George, I see George, you got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, just want to clarify, you do not advocate putting a numerical or any type of goal on the increase. A lot of people would like to commit to, I want to get to this certain point as a church.
Well, I understand that, and I probably am part of that. But when you divide this up, how do I know what my little piece of this piece is? Whether it's a $50,000 budget or $1 million budget, I don't necessarily know where I stand in a $250,000 budget, but I do know with no doubt where I stand, where my giving in relation to my income is. I know exactly where that is, but I don't know where I fit in this. And then I won't spend a lot of time on it, but let's take this as an example. I've used this before. Let's say our church has a $250,000 budget and we'd like to go to $275,000 because we want to hire a youth director. Okay, that seems reasonable enough. Well, let's say one person in that church says, don't worry about it. I'll write a check for $275,000 and we're done. What are the rest of us supposed to do at that point? Here's what we do. Bermuda, here I come. Church is taken care of. That's the worst case scenario. So George, what I'm saying is this is probably more of an art than it is a science. You're balancing these two kind of moving parts at the same time, where the sum total of all of these individual moving parts then move this thing called the church. So If you think about the old Swiss watch, it's got a ton of little bitty parts in it that make this larger thing work. So I don't know if I was clear on that, but the point is, don't let the individual get absorbed by the bigger picture, because we need to know where we stand in that. And I do believe that if all of our individual members grow by 1%, we're going to get that 275 and we're going to get that youth director. I do believe that.
Yeah.
So that's here. Yeah, this, I guess, why I don't have PowerPoints, because you bring up better questions than I can make bullet points in advance for. But this is what I would recommend. Folks, as you know, stewardship is a form of discipleship. And we see throughout Scripture that proportional giving, first fruits giving, and tithe giving seems to be how God's people have understood blessings. Are we on the same page so far? Okay, that's good theology, I think. Considering that if all of us can grow 1% and then put all of that together, we may here at the church be able to get that youth director next year. I would that could be a little carrot also dangling over here, that if we all can grow, then perhaps we can increase our presence at the local food pantry, financially and volunteer-wise. And I've used that successfully, that when you grow, we grow. But it's hard to do it the other way. When we grow, you don't necessarily grow. So I would balance it. And Georgia, I think I've confused this issue completely when I look at you over here on my left-hand side. Does any of that make sense to you?
Yes, it makes sense. I was just running some other things through my mind. I heard you, and I understand.
Yeah, okay, good. Good points, though. I will say that the church's plans for the future are not 100% silenced during a stewardship season or campaign, but they are a result of what I do over here. That's not the pump to be primed, the church. The pump to be primed is my discipleship. So that's what I would recommend. Okay, good point. Well, let's keep moving, because this is getting better and better. Your questions are really good. I think I should promote you all to stewardship 201 instead of 101 or even 601. So you want to do this every year. You want to shake it up a little bit. Different theme, different scriptures, different emphasis, but all about growing as a giver in proportion to one's income. You might even have a campaign prayer during this time that some small group writes, that even you start using 3 or 4 weeks in advance of the campaign. And it might be that you pick a certain time each day. If any of you have read Sue Nielsen Kibbe's book, she's a big proponent on breakthrough prayer. I am too. I think that is just a wonderful thing. What breakthrough prayer is, it's a 2 or 3 sentence prayer that everyone in the congregation is challenged to memorize and to repeat it at a certain time each day, wherever you are. You can say, okay, Mount Bethel's campaign prayer time is 12 noon. And then spiritually, wherever people are, at work, at the store, wherever they are, they just pause and pray that campaign prayer. And this is really a wonderful thing where children and youth can do this too. I mean, we're not talking about a long, complicated thing. And even 8 or 10 people in your congregation. This is spiritual stuff. They're good at this. Smaller congregations know how to do this because they're praying all the time. So they can be praying this way also. You might even print it on a little card or something and give it out to everybody, 3 or 4 Sundays in advance of starting this stewardship series. You might, I don't know, you might put it on a coffee mug, do something like that. Whatever, get it out. And then you build it into every Sunday's worship. That it becomes a congregational prayer. It becomes a congregational prayer. Everybody prays it. You also ask all your meetings to begin with that prayer over the course of those 2 months, a month leading up to this, and while it's being implemented. It gets everybody on the same page. Everybody begins to hear the same thing. Everybody begins to hear the challenge. I think those are very, very important to do some prayer work, because this is not just a financial thing. This is very much a spiritual thing. And again, when you're asking people to step out of the boat, you better have Jesus somewhere close by, don't you think? In case somebody decides to shout wind, you really want people to be prepared for this. The next thing I think is good is, if you are a mid-sized or large church, you don't mail these back in. You bring them to the altar during that time in worship. Sealed envelope, special time in worship. Again, mid-sized, large church, this way I suggest you do it. Small church, you can do it too. You just, again, we mentioned last week, we don't want this to cause a lot of friction and end up with a negative response. But if people are positive, there will be people in the church who understand this as the theological way you do things. Come forward to receive communion. Come forward perhaps to, for baptism. You come forward for the vows of membership. You come forward to be consecrated on a summer mission trip. You come forward to do whatever has been lifted up as God important to that congregation. And so I would have them bring it. Sealed envelopes, of course. Nobody needs to just lay them out in the open like that. I'm also going to give you some quick things that seem to be obvious, but I have been told, and I have learned this along the way, these are not obvious. Okay. One thing, you have to stress the confidentiality of these pledge commitments. Must stress it. These are not going to appear on social media. You're not going to make a list of them on the website with the amounts. This is for certain eyes only, and you decide whose eyes they are. And you let people know that whoever, if you have a financial person, if it's going to be a church staff person, is going to pastor, they're the only ones that are going to look at these. So they're not going to the finance committee or stewardship committee. Only totals would be shared with public groups. Many people are afraid of it. They said, who's going to see this if I sign this? You want people to say confidential, certain eyes only on this. The second thing you want to tell people is they can change it. Circumstances change. You want to be very clear. If circumstances change, then just notify that designated person and change it. These are not legal pieces of paper. We're not going to take them to the bank for a loan. We're not going to sell them to a bill collector. We're not going to do anything with them other than make plans for our budget. That's what we're going to do with them. So they're all changeable. I've been in ministry for a long time, and we still get into this kind of debate. What does the word pledge mean? Now, to older generations who are not many in the church right now, it may have had some negative connotations. So we changed the language. We said, okay, statement of financial commitment or estimate of giving, or, hope for next year. So you can change the name, but the mechanism is the same. It's still a piece of paper, or if you have this on your website, a pledge tab on your website, they can do it there. But the mechanism is the same. It is the accumulation of individual pledges that will be totaled so that the church can know what it's going to work with. So does that all make sense? The names, or you tweak them according to where you are and what your church responds to. You also, again, confidential, can be changed, are two important things to get across to your congregation. Let's see. I see a hand. Suzetta, you got a hand?
Yeah. Yeah, there are 2 questions in the chat.
Okay.
Thought I should bring that to your attention.
All right. In the economy we're in, many people have seen their income fall and expenses have increased beyond their control. What language do we use to address these situations? Absolutely. The wonderful thing about proportional giving is that it goes up and down where you are in life. You see, if you're not where you were last year, then you would still do your proportion. All right, that's the short answer. You could even say, the widow, come on now, keep those 2 cents. You don't need to be bringing those to the temple. So Jesus didn't give anybody, didn't take away anybody's joy of giving for their circumstances. See, you all see that in scripture. Jesus didn't take that joy away. As a matter of fact, I think this Sunday, they're going to just fuss with Mary for pouring this perfume on Jesus' feet, aren't they? Are y'all preaching on that one? Isn't that this Sunday? Yeah, that's what I thought. And Jesus says, whoa, yeah, she's doing a beautiful thing. Now, that's the theology, George. The reality is you got hurting people in your congregation. Mm-hmm. So I think you challenge people to do what they feel God can help them do. You see, we're not going to criticize anybody ever in this. You do what you can do. And I think I would leave it at that. You do what you can do based on your circumstances. But you're right, things are tough. I mean, we have this discussion at the dinner table nightly about the price of groceries, the price of fuel to drive the cars, everything. And so we're compassionate, and at the same time, this is the theology. You and God figure out how you're going to make this work. That would be my suggestion. Again, I don't strong arm anybody. I never have as a pastor. It's all by invitation only. And you decide what that invitation looks like. How do you navigate a congregation where they refuse to allow the pastor to see the list of givers of regular tithes and offerings? That's an age-old battle. Here's what we want to look at the end. This is a good question. I didn't even have it in here. I would like, as pastor, to see a report at the end of the campaign that says number of pledgers. How many people actually turned this card in? I would like to see the total amount. Now, let's see the total amount. I would like to see how many actually raised their pledge from last year. 2, 3. If it was none raised their pledge from last year, it would tell me my teaching and my challenge was not accepted. You hear what I'm saying? It wasn't accepted unless there's some extenuating circumstances like George brought up. But if there's not, then I would reasonably assume that there would be an increase at some level of pledges for the next year. I would also like to know how many brand new first-time commitments were turned in. brand new, first time. And that's the kind of thing that I report out. I may not know who these folks are, but once you start keeping this data, you can start to see some trends and kind of figure out, where things are happening or not happening. Now, the only time I would want to know how much someone gives is if I were going to nominate them to be on the finance committee or the staff parish committee. I would want to know, because a non-giver on the staff parish committee is going to keep me poor that entire pastorate. You understand that? I'm not playing with people who don't give, talking about a raise for me. Yeah, it's just not going to work. So I would want to know if they're on the finance committee, the staff parish, maybe the trustees. I don't know. I would say at a lesser level, but I wouldn't worry about it to put them on the prayer team or the mission team or the worship team. I don't really need to know. What I need to know is, will they show up on time? Will they get the tasks done? So that's where I am with that. But I hear what you're saying. Some churches have that, under double lock and key, and let's get on with other things. Exactly. So excellent question. All right, you all have some good questions today. Let me continue on. I don't have a lot more to say about this because I wanted to open it up a little bit. There are canned annual campaign programs out there. Most of the megachurch pastors over the last 10 years have come up with one. Adam Hamilton, Tom Berlin in my conference. The list goes on and on. Years ago, this fellow out of what was his name? John Ed Matheson came up with one, and there's just been a series of these on and on. My thought about these is they almost take a project manager to do, because there's a lot of pieces and parts, all good. But if you don't have a stewardship chair that says, I'm going to stay on top of this, and I'm going to keep the calendar, and I'm going to make sure the other parts of the church life do what they want to do, then you'll end up cutting corners, and you'll end up only doing what your volunteer will do. And so for many people, those excellent programs probably are only 100% effective in large churches with a staff person as a project manager. Doesn't mean you're not doing lay people, but you're more of the administrator of those kinds of canned stewardship programs. Again, it may work in your church, especially if you're a large church pastor. It probably will work and work effectively. Small church pastor, I think you'll just be overwhelmed. Mid-sized church pastor, same thing. I think you'd be overwhelmed with that. So I want to move into what has been, and you may say, and I'm fine with it, you may say this is just old school, this Consecration Sunday by Herb Miller, but a new version of this is coming out in May. And I don't know how that is. Herb Miller died in 2017, so it'll be interesting to see what it is. But this has been a go-to campaign since, I think, 1997, I believe. And many churches have used it to the letter and have had good results. Many churches, kind of cherry pick some things out of it and have, they have some results, but not the full thing. This is something you might want to get and look at. It's about a 6-person team that runs this Consecration Sunday. Its theory is that it is disconnected from the budget. As I said earlier, the budget is only completed once all of the commitments have been added up. And then the stewardship committee then sends a memo over to the finance committee and says, this church has committed $100,000 in their own personal growth. And so they said they will give that personal growth to the church. So finance committee, budget committee, come up with a budget of $100,000. Now, that is without any kind of other evaluation. A finance committee comes back and says, whoa, we already this year have a $150,000 budget. You're telling us to cut it by 50. Or best case scenario, the stewardship committee says, look, they've committed 125. You can raise it, from last year. But we do know certain things, and this is where you have to be very, very much with trends. There's always a certain amount of what we used to call loose plate giving. Now, I guess you call it random website giving. I don't know if it's called loose plate anymore, especially after pandemic. Not many people even touch a plate or touch cash. So, but there was this kind of additional number called loose plate giving. And then there was a second additional number called regular giver non-pledging, And so a finance committee could, and I could probably say yes to this, take the results of the Consecration Sunday with good data, add those two figures, and you could come up with a potential budget number, and you could begin work on that number. So there's some art in this. It's not all science. It's not all, cut and dry. There's a little bit of wisdom and experience in it too. I do like the Consecration Sunday, especially for any of you who probably have worship attendance of 50 plus. If you have average worship attendance of 50 plus, I think you can do this. If you have average worship attendance of less than 50, I think you could still get some good pointers out of this and still use the Grow One chart and some of the other kind of very good information in this small book. This is a book that stays in your library your entire ministry, because you'll look back at it and say, oh, well, I remember reading that there. And again, if you want to request my seminar that I did a few weeks ago on Consecration Sunday, just email me and I'll send you the YouTube link to that. Again, let me stop right there. Any questions so far? Everybody looks like they've just been hit by a wave. Is that it? Make sure you just circle one thing today out of all of these things that you might want to work on and you might want to move forward with. There's no way. It's taken me years to think through all of this stuff. I would not dare say, go forth and do it all today, but find some starting points, find some growth points, find some next step points. Shannon Marie, I see your hand.
When I was working on the assignment for this week and looking at a 4-week preaching series, I stumbled upon, I always go to discipleship stuff and see if they've got things out there. They had an interesting one if you wanted to look at the perspective a little different and thinking about October, thinking about All Saints and what that means. And it was called Exploring Stewardship with the Saints. And it's the sermon series, and looking at what they had to provide with Sarah Crosby, St. Luke the Evangelist, Francis of Assisi, and Mary McLeod Bethune. I was really impressed with just in those sermon spaces itself, looking at things a little bit differently than perhaps we have thought about it in the past, and just wanted to share that resource in case somebody else was looking at something. It feels a little less money, but it definitely talks about necessity, generosity, poverty, and authority, which were interesting concepts in that. Are you familiar with that series at all?
No, I am going to look at it. I think we have lots of good resources like that, and you may want to use that this year or just come back to it next year. You know, do something. You could do the Wesley this year and do that series next year. So I think you always want to make notes of where you're finding this good material. So no, but it sounds good. The current buzzword in stewardship is generosity, which is good. How do you measure generosity? Again, I think it almost goes back to then proportional giving, how you measure it, because otherwise generosity is exclusively a qualitative value. But so oftentimes in stewardship, we are linking it with a quantitative step forward. So just think about that. I'll use the word generosity 100 times, but at the same time, I know that how do you measure that as a discipleship response? And that would be something. Does that make sense to you when you take a word like generosity? It is very much qualitative. At the same time, we are called to be quantitative sometimes. So link those together. I had been thinking about that a long time. Thanks for bringing that up. Let's see. So Sharon, you've given the link to Kiko and anybody else that wants it. It's right there. So very good. The consecration Sunday, we'll go back to a little bit, does require the meal. It does require the meal. It does require actually announcing the results at the meal, the totals. And if you read the statistics in it, and I agree with it, it hasn't been as front and center because there's so many choices now, but this is a good starting point. I would just get this. I bought this one off of Amazon. I don't know. I probably gave my older copies away, but that's out there. I don't really have much more to do today, but your assignment, if you're willing to take it, would be to think through what your 4 weeks will look like. Maybe some scriptures, maybe you want to do the John Wesley thing, and begin with 3 or 4 bullet points per Sunday of a possible stewardship series. Okay? And that will give you some advanced work for this fall, however you want to do it. Do the John Wesley, go to the website here on the Board of Discipleship, I guess, and look at theirs. If you have Consecration Sunday, you might want to look at it. Don't make it hard. Make it life-giving. Don't make it, don't make it a burden. Make it a joy. And people will respond to it. I'm convinced of that. Well, I went through all my notes. It's supposed to last another 15 minutes, but I don't have another 15 minutes of anything. So I will take a couple of quick questions and we'll call it a success today. Anybody got anything else for us?
So Bert, I think part of why I feel like I was hit by a tidal wave of information is that when I took the last assignment to my team of creating this sort of rhythm for stewardship and creating a calendar, the general consensus was we don't need to ask the people who are already here for money. We need to get new people, and then we'll have plenty of money. And so I'm interested in your thoughts on how do you cultivate this sense that stewardship isn't just about like forcing people to give. One of the people used the expression drawing blood from a stone, but of like that it is a spiritual discipline in which we're like giving ourselves to God.
Well, there is so much sabotage by well-meaning people that you have encountered in the last 7 days who would prefer new people give their money rather than for me to do some spiritual work around my giving? I mean, you see that all the time. And unfortunately, we're not, I'm just thinking through, if we were a stone, then we could build a foundation, could we not? Rather than try to draw blood from it. But we are functioning human beings loved by God who are grateful for the many blessings. So that puts it in a kind of a different cliche, so to speak. I wouldn't give up. I would say, you're right. We all will be growing through this process, long-term, short-term, those yet to come. We will encourage them to grow in their giving and their generosity. And, you might just say, this is something I can't back down from. I feel like this is part of discipleship. And, to not address it would be like not expecting anyone to grow in their prayer life or their life of service. David, it's hard, but I think maybe you don't have to be on the defensive with it like so many people will do that. I think maybe you just kind of flip it and say, I think there's room for all of us to grow, and I don't mind taking some steps in that direction myself and my family. New people, yeah, I don't know how many new people we're getting these days. I hope we are getting some, but if we wait for the new people, we're going to go out of business, I believe. That's one of the realities. Back in the 90s, we really in the church were building buildings left and right with the mantra, if we build it, they will come. You all might be too young for that one, but I'm not. I was right in the middle of it. If you build it, they will come. Well, what we found out is that what wasn't said is we really meant if we build it, they will come, and hopefully they will pay for it too. But what happened is we built it, many of them came, but we're still having to pay for it. So the idea that this unknown group is going to show up and save us from our commitments hasn't really panned out over the years. And so I understand that. Again, David, be gentle with your people.
Yeah, we had
Walk slowly.
somebody.
Yeah.
We had somebody in our conversation from another church kind of in the same general area who does stewardship really well, and her response I thought was very insightful. She said she's been doing this in her church for 10 years, and so they've been tracking like how long it takes someone who's new to the church to give what they consider a substantial amount, so over $1,000. Would be so somebody new to the church, how long before they're giving $1,000 a year? And she said the average is at least 3 years.
It's amazing data.
If you're willing to depend on new people to support your budget, it's going to be a long process.
It's going to be tough, really is. So, you'll get so many people who stick their foot out and hope to trip you up on this. We always pay our bills as if the mission of the Church of Jesus Christ is to pay bills. I think it's probably more to change lives than it is to pay bills, or people will say, such and such always comes in with a big check at the end of the year and will take care of things. Or, perhaps we talk too much about money, and in reality, we don't talk about money at all. That's what some people will say. And I've even had them say to me is that I wouldn't have come to church today if I had known my pocket was going to be picked. So there's a lot of people that have built a wall up against financial growth. They just have. And I would still be faithful to the call rather than try to convince people who have spent a lifetime convincing themselves that there's no growth in them. So I don't know. That's a tough one, David. You're on your own there. That's why I'm a consultant. I get to leave at the end of the day, and you have to figure it out. Good. One more question. I like these questions because I think they're on our minds. Anybody else? Well, okay then. Try to just think through what an annual campaign or an annual preaching series might look like at your church. And then next week, we'll finish this up with some kind of, special topics, the endowment, the capital campaign, perhaps some ways to look at church finance. And then you will be graduates of the Stewardship Academy at that point. All right, then. God bless. We'll see you next week.
Thank
Let
you.
me know if you want Consecration Sunday seminar video. Okay?